Hi, this is Dave T1963, and I'm going to do a little bit of filming today in a typical setup that I might encounter with how I hunt. Now, one thing I have to say, it's kind of hard for me because I live in a part of Texas that just don't have a lot of trees. I've only got one maple tree I can really get up in, well, maybe two, and it's a 2-hour drive for me to get to the public land where I can set up in trees. And it's really hard when you're trying to self-film. So I don't have all the fancy equipment, so take this for what it's worth. It'll be little short videos or medium length videos to kind of set this up. But I just want to kind of set up a little bit about myself and how I hunt, because I don't approach saddle hunting like your typical, stereotypical saddle hunter does with a high tether, a ring of steps, and all that kind of stuff. I don't always try. In fact, I prefer not to get on the backside of most trees. I prefer to get on the side of the tree, and I'll try to demonstrate this through various videos, especially when I get up to Dan's and he can help film and stuff. But I put out one of the first videos showing 360 shooting off of a platform many years ago. And I just want to, there's a common myth going around that you have to have 360 shooting to be a successful saddle hunter. And I will tell you, probably in 90% of the setups I do, you don't get 360 shooting because there's too many limbs and the trees just don't facilitate it. Now, if I was hunting up with those 30-foot tall, oak trees or popples or ash trees, where you got a relatively straight tree with very few limbs to get to hunting height, I might consider a ring of step more, but we don't have that around here. And when you're up 30 foot, 25 to 30 foot, and you're above the normal line of sight of deer, it's much easier to move around a tree. You're going to see in the upcoming videos that a lot of times I'm 6 to 10 foot high in real thicky, gnarly trees. Think mesquite trees. Go Google mesquite trees and you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about. And there's so many limbs. There's not a straight trunk a lot of times that comes up in the tree. And even if there is, 3 foot off the ground, you're encountering limbs. So the odds of going in and setting up on a tree without massive trimming to be able to shoot 360 is just not feasible. And at 6 to 12 foot high, I'm not wanting to walk around a tree while there's a buck in range. That's stupid, in my opinion. Now, I know I'll catch heat from a lot of veteran hunters, and that's okay. We all have our own thing. But Dave Toms is not going to try to walk around a tree to get from the backside to the front side when I'm 6 to 12 foot high and I've got a mature buck within 15 to 20 yards of me. Not going to happen. I've tried that in the past, and I got busted. So you're going to see in the videos how I approach trees and how I set up for shooting. And like I said, here's the thing about 360 shooting. If you're up 30 foot, knock yourself out. And if you can completely cover your scent or get it above the deer, more power to you. I would definitely try to do that. But here's what I will say. At 6 to 15 to 20 foot high, you're not going to stop your downwind scent stream. I don't care what you put on, unless you climb inside a plastic bag and tie up the top, which I don't recommend. You're not going to escape a deer's nose, not at those heights. So if you're constantly being busted or seen moving and stuff from the backside, and that's happened consistently, I would tell you work on your setups. You have to get to where you can predict deer movement, whether it's using funnels or wind and thermal currents. There's a host of ways to do it, blocking trails, all that kind of stuff. Now, I'm not saying during the rut, anything can happen and a deer can come from anywhere. I get that. We're all going to get busted. But in all reality, I would probably say 80 to 90% of the time, I'm shooting a deer in the direction I think I'm going to wind up shooting them. Now, sometimes they'll fool me in exactly the direction that they come from and how they get to that spot. But more times than not, when I'm setting up on a specific shot, it's either 1 to 2 or 3 shots right out in front of me. Another misconception is that saddle hunters need to set up behind the tree and hide behind it. If you're on a telephone pole tree, probably so. You know, especially in a heavily pressured thing. You're going to see in the video I'm about to shoot that if you've got a lot of cover around you, you can set up in a saddle exactly like you would a tree stand facing the deer. Okay? And I'm going to demonstrate that on a little maple tree to kind of show that. But, you know, there's just so many misconceptions and actual paradigms or groupthink about how saddle hunters should approach a tree. And here's where I want to encourage folks. Initially learn all that, take it all in, but then every time you approach a tree, don't do it, how do I make this tree fit in to how I can shoot as a saddle hunter? Flip that around and say, how is it I as a saddle hunter can I set up in this tree for the best shot opportunity? And you're going to find that you can get creative. And I'm going to give you one example and then I'll get to the videos. There was a time a few years back I was hunting a mesquite tree. And if you haven't seen mesquite trees, once again, please go Google it and go look them up. But a lot of times you have big, huge trunks that come up and branch out at 3 to 4 foot high, and then they kind of go up from there. This particular tree, in the center mass of the tree, there wasn't any real big limbs to put a tree stand or a saddle on. And even the ones that were kind of going up in the center, it was so thick and gnarly in there, you would have to do an extensive amount of trimming to be able to shoot from that position, and the deer would notice that. What I did is I got out on one of those huge limbs that was going to the side. There was another limb about 6 to 7 foot above that, and I tethered directly above my head and I stood on the limb. And I had an opening, one small opening that I could shoot from. Now I didn't get a deer there, one didn't come by, but I was able to get in a tree that really you couldn't have hunted with a stand, with a caveat to get to. You couldn't hunt the traditional saddle setup with even a platform against the trunk of a tree or a ring of steps. You had to be creative and you had to look and say the opening to where I need to shoot to is off of that big limb over here. How am I going to tether in? Well, there was a limb above, and that's how I did it. And I kind of just hung like in a swing, stood on the branch. Now, could you have done that with the stand? Yeah, you could have, but not with the stand. What I would do in that case, if I'm wearing a rock climbing harness or preferably a saddle while I'm stand hunting, I will not wear a full body harness if I go out my lone wolf stands. I'll wear my saddle. But you can ditch the stand at the base of the tree and hunt it just like I did in a saddle if you got it, standing on the limbs with a tether. To me, the key advantage of the saddle system is that tether. Now that tether can get in your way, and I'll talk about these in future videos. There's ways to mitigate tether through tether height and creative hookups and bow positioning and stuff like that. But that tether is key to hunting in a bunch of variety of trees. You do not, and here's the main point, the main takeaway. You do not have to tether to the trunk or the limb that your platform goes on. And people need to start understanding that. And if you got a tree with a lot of branches, just like you do in a stand sitting out in front and facing the deer, you can do that with the saddle. And that's exactly what I do. One more quick example where a stand typically shines better, in my opinion, than a saddle. And that's these huge cedars that get real thick branches and cover going all the way up from the base, really from the ground all the way up. And you want to get up in that cedar and shoot out in front of you. Now with the stand, you can trim 1 or 2 branches on the main trunk and face out. You can have a short window cleared out in that tree, not 360 around the tree, but just in one side, to where you can sit and shoot out. And that's an excellent way to set up in a big cedar. That's how I prefer to do it. But you can do the same thing with the saddle by approaching it like a stand. Put your platform on the side you want to shoot out to, hook your tether either up to a limb or even to the trunk and lean against other branches, to provide back support or whatever. So once again, either tool you can make work. It comes down to experience, having an open mind, and not getting locked in that you have to do it this way. Man, if I listened to some of the older experts on saddle hunting and tried to apply those techniques to where I hunt, I would give up saddle hunting, to be quite frank with you. And I find saddles extremely versatile and more comfortable. But if I had to lock into always going with a high tether and using a ring of steps and all that, I ditched it for a while because I wasn't satisfied with it. I never liked that, and so I hunted out of stands more than I did saddles back then. But knowing what I know now, I can hunt those trees more comfortably and just as effectively, if not more so, with the saddle. So that's enough with this intro video. Let me get up. The first one, what I'll do is I'll kind of just frame up the maple tree we're going to set up in and talk a little bit about how I would set up in that tree with a stand. And I'm not going to demonstrate it right now. I guess I could later on put the stand up in there. And then I'll make another video where I approach that same setup with the saddle. Now, I'm in my backyard. You're going to see that I'm not going to use a lineman belt. My platform in this tree is going to be about 7 foot above the ground. I know you should wear a lineman's belt and be tethered in the whole time. I get that, but it's raining outside. The wind's kicking up and stuff, so I'm just going to get this done. All right? JT1963 out.